Hello everyone, and this is BioPhoenix here, and today we're going back with another episode of Games I Wish Got Fan Translated, Part 14. And I just realized, we have almost as many parts as there is mainline Final Fantasy games. Well anyways, you know the drill at this point if you watched like any other part before, that yes, it's a series of videos where I like to talk about a lot of random obscure games that are Japan only or don't have any sort of English translation to them that I think look really interesting and that I hopefully would like to play one day. And as I always say at the beginning of these videos, of course, I don't expect any of these games to happen anytime soon, because trying to make fan translations for video games is not easy at all. It is actually kind of a pain in the ass from the methods that I've seen. So these discussions are really just for funsies. Also, another thing I want to mention too is that I do apologize if there are games on this list that I don't have a whole lot to say about them, and that's mainly because some of these games are so obscure and buried that it's hard to find certain information on some of them, or even just a basic write-up of what the game's about. But I do my best to bring out some information regarding some of these games, and you never know, maybe sometime in the future, maybe I might review some of them. Since I have done that with Marika on the Sega Saturn and Desperia on the Dreamcast. So, with that being said, let's begin. So the first one we're taking a look at here is on PS2, and that happens to be Yoshitsune-ki. So firstly, I have to say, I really love this cover art. I think it looks really cool, and the art style almost kind of looks like the Death Note artist, Obata, but I'm not 100% sure on that, but it definitely does look kind of similar. So this is an action game that was developed by Dream Factory, which I find to be kind of interesting because they've made a couple games that I found to be fairly amusing. Most notably is
The Bouncer.
And this is a game that I actually did try out before, though I didn't put much time into it for obvious reasons. I couldn't able to like read it and know exactly what I was doing, but from what I played of it though, it seemed like a pretty simple action game that has some minor RPG elements where you go through some stages, and after you beat the stages you go back to town and you do your little stuff and upgrades and whatever, and then you just go back out and do more like missions and such. It's definitely a game that I do want to go back and try again, as it did seem pretty interesting. Plus, I definitely need to do a refresher on the controls, because I do remember them being a bit more on the simplistic side, which, you know, not always a bad thing. Now, before we move on, one weird thing I have to mention is that if you plan on looking up more information on this game, there's a chance that Google might actually get this game confused with another one, because, believe it or not, there's another Japan-only game on PS2 that has a very similar name, and it also came out in the year 2005, and that happens to be The Story of the Hero Yoshitsune, which is the FromSoft game, which I talked about in an older episode. So if you're trying to look up stuff on the Dream Factory game, the one I'm talking about here, you might find stuff about the FromSoft game, or if you're trying to look up stuff on the FromSoft game, then you might find stuff on the Dream Factory game. Yeah, it's so fucking confusing. And to make things even more ironic is the fact that in the year 2005, we got these two games, and then there's Genji, Dawn of Samurai, which all came out in 2005, and they all star the character Yoshitsune. Yeah, I guess 2005 was just the year of Yoshitsune. And as for the next game, we're taking a look at a PS1 game, of course, because there's a never-ending amount of them, and that happens to be Circadia. So this is a visual novel adventure game, but does happen to have some turn-based battles within it. But the thing that I really like most about this game are two things. One, I really like the background graphics, for that I think they all look really cool looking, and two, the story concept I find to be very interesting. So from what I gathered is that the game takes place in a city that was built underwater, so that explains why everything in this game looks so cool. And when our main character travels to this underwater city, he ends up meeting a strange creature, and the creature tells him that the city is in danger and that there's a chance that it all might collapse underwater, and well, that would suck. And yeah, that's the basics of what I was able to find out, and yeah, I think it sounds like a pretty interesting story. Like I said, I really like the setting in this game. And just like most visual novels out there is many different characters you can interact with, making choices, and of course there is apparently different endings with the different characters. And like I mentioned before, there are battles within this game that are done in a turn-based combat, which is kinda interesting, but I don't know if this game would truly qualify as an RPG. For that, I don't know if you gain any EXP out of them, and also I don't think there's any like grinding you can do in the game, because apparently the battles are very few and far between. But it's still something that is rather interesting that I would like to check out sometime. And the next one we're taking a look at is a PC98 game. In fact, it's actually a trilogy of games, so I figured I might as well cover them all here, and that happens to be Gensai Kaio Den. At least that's the name of the second game in this series, which is the one that I first found out about. The first one is called Gensai Kaio Den, and the third game is called Gensai Kaio Saga 3. And from what I can tell, they all seem very similar with their gameplay, where they're all turn-based RPGs with some exploration and you get a party of characters. Although the first game has a different perspective for the battles, where they're done in the first-person view with a black background, very similar to Dragon Quest, where 2 and 3 have like the side view, kinda like Final Fantasy. And all three of these games also have different settings, too. So the first one is more of a medieval setting, the second one has an Arabian setting, and the third one has a steampunk setting. And I think they all look really cool, and like I've said a million times, I just love the graphics in PC98 games. They're just really awesome looking. And they're all developed by the company Compile, who have made a few games that I've really enjoyed, but the one unfortunate thing that I have heard from someone that has made fan translations for PC98 games is that apparently trying to do them for games made by Compile are really hard, because the way how they were programmed is that it's really hard to try to change the text files over. So yeah, if any of these games ever get fan translated, it's not going to be easy, and I don't expect it to happen anytime soon. But you never know, maybe someday someone will crack the code for all these cool Compile games. And as for the next one we're talking about, this is a very fascinating one because it's a genre that I actually haven't even covered throughout the whole Games I Wish Got Fan Translated series, and that happens to be a real-time strategy. So which RTS did I find that looks so freaking cool? It's called Retsu. Probably not pronounced correctly, but forget all that though. Like, just look at this menu screen. Like, this just looks awesome. Yeah, it's another crazy detailed cyberpunk looking game, and yeah, the artwork is just fantastic. Like, I absolutely love this. When I found out about this, I was kind of shocked that it was a thing. But one unfortunate thing is that it's really hard to find this game, or really anything else about it. Even typing in the name on Google will barely get you the results for this game, so you really have to be very specific if you want to know, and even then, there's not a whole lot of pictures and videos available. And according to Moby Games, this game plays very similar to StarCraft, which is a game I grew up on, so yeah, that's a win right there. So if I'm ever gonna go back and play another old school RTS game, yeah, this one is definitely gonna be up there if I can actually find a way of playing it, because man, it looks so fucking cool. And next one we got here is on PS2, and believe it or not, it was a game published by Sony themselves, and that is Pride of the Dragon Peace. So this is yet another game that is really hard to find information on. Hell, it even took me a while just to find a decent looking box art that wasn't just someone taking a picture of the game and selling it on eBay. So apparently this is an RPG where you have to take care of your dragon, but you can also ride on him and you can like use him to like fight monsters and such. It actually looks really cool. And the thing that I really like about this game is the graphical art style. I think it looks great. It kind of reminds me of two different games. It reminds me a little bit of Dark Cloud mixed with this other weird one called Ephemeral Fantasia. I don't know if how many people know or remember this game, but it was a weird RPG that was about like this guy with a talking guitar, and the whole game ran on a time limit, so yeah, it's one of those games. But anyways, yes, this Dragon Peace game kind of reminds me visually of those two games that I mentioned, and I think that's a good thing, because those two games did have some nice art direction going on for them. So yeah, this is a dragon game that looks pretty cool, and I wish I could talk more about it, but unfortunately, the internet isn't wanting me to right now. And next up, we got yet another PS2 game, and it's also published by Sony themselves as well, and yet, it's also just as buried as the last one, and that happens to be Sagashi ni Ikouyo. Now, this is a very early RPG that came out on PS2. It was like January of 2001. And graphically speaking, yeah, it does look more like a PS1 game, although a very nice looking PS1 game than it does a PS2 game, but at least it does have some nice art direction when it comes to certain aesthetics. But yes, this happens to be yet another turn-based RPG in a medieval setting, and you have many different characters in your party, and, well, yeah. Yeah, it sounds like typical shit, but I don't know, there's something very interesting about this. Like, I was just so fascinated with the fact that Sony published this game, and yet, like, there's like almost nothing about it. I couldn't even find out who the developer was on this one. There was one website that had said it was a company called Riz, but after looking into it, I just never found another source that confirmed that, so I have no idea. So I guess we'll call this Sony's Mysterious RPG on PS2. As again, I wish I could talk more about it, but they ain't making it easy for me. And next up, we're going back to PS1, and this is also a pretty odd one, and that happens to be Kuuu. I probably fucked that up. So this is an adventure game that takes place in China, and it is apparently based after a Chinese novel. And it is an adventure game, where on the first disc, you play as a character named Ryu, and on the second disc, you play as a girl named Yu. And just like most games like this, you talk to people to progress through the story, you make different choices, and of course depending what they are, you get different results, I imagine, and yeah. So that's the gist of the game, and I know this isn't gonna appeal to everyone, as I know there's no like crazy action shit going on, but it's something that does kinda interest me. Also, I do find that the character models look really good for a game made in 1997. And there is a couple pre-rendered backgrounds I've seen that also do look really nice too. But how I discovered this game was kind of interesting. So I was looking through one company's back catalog of games and I was like, ooh, what is this? And I was like, oh, I never knew they made a game like this. And that happens to be Gust. Yep, the same company that put out the Atelier or the Atelier games or whatever you want to call them there, that RPG series that they like pump out a lot these days. Yep. The same company that made all that, yeah, they made this shit. This is definitely one of their earlier games when they used to put out a bunch of other random stuff. Yeah, did you know that they actually made a racing game? And it's actually pretty solid too. Well anyways, yeah, I thought it was just a very interesting game to discover that, you know, literally no one else out there is talking about this game. And if someone else is talking about it by chance, well, welcome aboard. Now, as for the next game we're going to be talking about is yet another Windows game, and it was actually released in Korea, and that happens to be Leithian in the Abyss. So this is a top-down action RPG, and it actually does remind me a little bit of Diablo, just from the little bit that I've been seeing here, but it also does have a party system to it as well. And I should also mention too, that there is also a sequel to the game. Well, it's actually a prequel, but you know, it came out after in 2002, and that happens to be Narsilin Leithian Another Story. And that one also looks really nice too. So yeah, not a whole lot that I can say about these two games, but pretty much they just look like really nice looking Diablo clones, and from what a little bit I've heard of the music, which yes, it is actually on YouTube, it is actually kind of a nice OST. Alright, now this next one is gonna be another weird game, but also kind of an amusing one. That happens to be a PS3 game. Yeah, we're talking about a PS3 game, not something I talked about too much on here. Although it's also a Vita game too, so there is that. And that happens to be Super Heroine Chronicles. So this is a tactical strategy RPG that is a crossover with a bunch of random anime stuff. And the game came out in 2014, and yet we didn't get an official localization, which is kind of understandable given that it is a crossover game, and well, you know, trying to renew all those licenses for here would just be annoying. Plus, it was a late PS3 game since the PS4 was already out, so yeah, I can kind of understand why we didn't get it. So, of course, now it's all up to the fan translators to make this one possible, if anyone was ever interested. So this one has quite a few random-ass animes thrown in together, and some I was not expecting to be in here. For some examples being Symphogear, Infinite Stratos, Hiden no Aria, and probably the two most random ones that I'm actually like somewhat familiar with happens to be frickin' Higurashi and Dream Hunter Rem. Yeah, Dream Hunter Rem being in a video game is something I actually welcome because that anime was just so fucking crazy and I loved it. And lastly, because of course they had to throw her into the game, but they also threw in Super Sonico. Because it seemed like a lot of games around this time were trying to insert her into the game in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, there's a couple others, but even just with this though, it's pretty damn random, and yeah, I kinda like the randomness of it. So if you're someone that really likes tactical RPGs, and you really like all these like random ass animes, then yeah, this is the game for you. Alright, and finally, as for the final game I'm gonna mention for this part, happens to be a PS2 game. This one happens to be Dragon Shadow Spell. Yet another tactical strategy RPG, but only that this one is not nearly as cutesy looking. And this game came out in 2007, so the chances of getting this game over here, yeah, probably was very slim. Even though well after the PS3 came out, we did get some pretty cool PS2 games, but it was pretty clear that we weren't able to get everything, and this is one of the games that unfortunately we didn't get. But it does look like a nice tactical strategy RPG with a nice art style. And it apparently does have some similarities to the Summon Night games, which is a series I still haven't played yet. I've been trying to get around to it, you know? It's like, too many freaking games out there. But yes, apparently it's pretty similar to it, and I've heard a lot of good things about that, so hey, that's actually a really damn good thing. And lastly I'll mention too, is that from what I've heard of the music, it's also pretty damn good. So that's all the games I'm talking about in episode 14 of Games I Wish Got Fan Translated. So as always, which one of these interests you the most, and which ones would you like to see get fan translated, or if there's another one that I haven't mentioned in any of my other parts that you'd like to see get made one day, well, just let me know, we can have a fun discussion about it. And I think in the last episode, I said something about how I want to do a video about all the ones that got wished fulfilled. Yeah, I should probably do that one next. Yeah, I think I'm going to do it next time. So, anyways, with that being said, thanks for watching and commenting, and have yourselves a great day.